The vineyard glowed in the soft amber light of the setting sun, casting long shadows across the elegantly arranged table at the heart of Prescott's Cellars in Napa Valley. Crystal glasses sparkled, candles flickered in antique holders, and the aroma of aged Cabernet mingled with hints of lavender from the surrounding garden. Claire Monroe stepped onto the patio in a sapphire blue gown, her heels clicking softly against the stone as she approached the table she had spent weeks perfecting. From the hand-lettered place cards to the imported linen napkins folded just so. The final event of the week-long celebration for her mother-in-law's 65th birthday was meant to be the pinnacle of perfection, a culmination of every ounce of effort Claire had poured into honoring the Prescott family. Yet, as she scanned the table, something felt off. 12 chairs circled the polished oak table, 12 gleaming place settings. Her eyes moved carefully across each name card: Margot, Charles, Ethan, Allison, Carter, but hers was nowhere to be found. She hesitated, thinking it had to be a mistake. Then Ethan appeared behind her, dressed in a charcoal gray suit, his hair perfectly tousled. "Oops," he said with a casual chuckle. "Guess we miscounted." The family laughed politely, as if it were the most harmless oversight in the world. Claire stared at him, stunned into silence, her heart pounding beneath her calm exterior. Her chair wasn't forgotten. It was removed, a deliberate message, hidden behind politeness and candlelight. A quiet exile in plain sight. Claire's breath caught, but she didn't falter. She let the silence stretch, absorbing every smirk, every uncomfortable glance turned away. Then, in a voice clear and composed, she said, "Seems I'm not family," and turned on her heel, walking away from the table, her gown trailing behind her like a royal cloak. She didn't shout, she didn't cry. The shame they had prepared for her did not land where they wanted it to. Instead, she stepped into the twilight with poise, her head high, and an eerie sense of calm settling over her. By the time they'd realize what she was doing, what she had already begun, it would be too late. Claire reached into her clutch, pulled out her phone, and opened the operations dashboard of her consulting firm's event division. In 30 minutes, every vendor, every reservation, every contract tied to the Prescott's luxury celebration would begin to unravel. And for once, they would be the ones left without a seat. Long before Napa Valley, candlelit humiliation, and 12 smug faces, Claire Monroe was just a driven girl from Milwaukee with a refurbished laptop and a dream. Raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs to make ends meet, Claire learned early that success wasn't inherited, it was built. She put herself through Northwestern's business school on scholarships and freelanced her way through internships no one offered her, eventually landing a junior role at a Chicago consulting firm. By the time she was 30, she had founded Clarity Strategies, a boutique consultancy specializing in streamlining executive-level operations for Fortune 100 companies. Her firm quickly earned a reputation for discretion, precision, and delivering results without drama. She wasn't just respected in boardrooms, she was feared in them. It was during a client engagement with a hedge fund in Manhattan that she first met Ethan Prescott, the charming Yale-educated portfolio manager with the easy grin and enviable Rolodex. Ethan had the kind of polished charm that came from generations of wealth, the effortless glide through society that people like Claire were expected to admire from the sidelines. But Ethan didn't just notice Claire. He pursued her. He was attentive, witty, surprisingly grounded in their private conversations. He called her brilliant, said he admired how she didn't need anyone to build her empire. For the first time, Claire let her guard down and imagined a life not just of professional success, but partnership. The Prescotts were a different story. Old money East Coast royalty, their wealth traced back to early steel magnates, and a family trust thick enough to buy a city block in Manhattan. Margot Prescott, Ethan's mother, was the unofficial queen of their social world, with charity board positions, Vogue features, and a Rolodex that could bend mayors to her will. She greeted Claire with a smile that never touched her eyes. "Impressive background," Margot had commented during their first meeting. "Self-made is so modern." Claire told herself it didn't matter. She wasn't marrying Margot. She was marrying Ethan. And he seemed different. He defended Claire's career choices, encouraged her business expansions, and seemed to prefer their modest Chicago lifestyle over the family's constant galas and luncheons. When he proposed 11 months later, Claire said yes, despite the occasional comments, the missed invitations, and the unmistakable undercurrent that she would never truly belong to the Prescott world. The wedding was a tasteful affair in Lake Forest, planned meticulously by Claire herself. The guest list leaned heavily on Margot's influence, but Claire held her ground on the details that mattered to her. Still, the cracks were forming. Ethan never quite contradicted his mother. Claire's role was praised publicly, but subtly belittled in private. "Claire has such an eye for logistics," Margot would say to her friends, the tone almost maternal, almost mocking. "It's like having our own family planner." Claire didn't realize it then, but she wasn't being accepted. She was being positioned, quietly, elegantly, into a supporting role in a story that had never been written for her. In the early years of her marriage, Claire tried to shrug off the small slights, the missed calls, the changed plans, the accidental oversights that always left her just outside the circle. At family events, she was introduced not as Ethan's wife or a business leader, but as Claire, our in-house genius with spreadsheets, often followed by a tight laugh and a pat on the hand from Margot, as if Claire were a precocious child rather than a woman who ran million-dollar deals before breakfast. Her achievements were treated as charming novelties rather than serious accomplishments. The Prescotts, with their generations of inherited wealth, viewed ambition as something new money needed to survive, not something they respected. Claire, ever composed, smiled through it all, careful not to make waves that Ethan would later have to smooth over. But the pattern deepened. At fundraisers, where Claire had brokered key donor relationships behind the scenes, Margot took credit at the podium without acknowledgement. At holidays, Claire was assigned kitchen duty while Madeline Shaw, Ethan's ex, now reappearing more often in casual family conversations, was still referenced fondly as practically one of us. Ethan dismissed her discomfort. "They don't mean anything by it," he'd say, or worse, "You're imagining it." Claire began to feel like a contractor living in a house she helped renovate but was never invited to own. The emotional toll grew, amplified by Ethan's growing emotional distance. Their conversations became transactional. Updates on schedules, business trips, social obligations. He stopped asking about her clients or celebrating her wins. Slowly, Claire was being edged out of the center of her own life, replaced not with conflict, but with polite indifference. The Prescotts were too refined for outright cruelty. Their weapon of choice was exclusion, subtle, strategic, and perfectly deniable. Claire's instincts told her this was more than just family politics. Something was changing. The Prescott family, once so lavish and confident, now asked odd questions about Claire's company finances and timelines. Margot requested small favors from Claire's firm, bypassing the usual client protocols. Vendors she referred began complaining about delayed payments, confused over who was truly managing the budgets. Ethan brushed it all off, but Claire's inner alarm bells were ringing. Something deeper was brewing beneath the surface, and she knew enough about strategy to recognize the setup of a trap. The only question now was, what was the end game? When Margot Prescott announced her plans to host a week-long 65th birthday celebration in Napa Valley, Claire seized the opportunity, not just as a daughter-in-law hoping to finally be accepted, but as a professional determined to deliver an unforgettable experience. This would be her grand gesture. She threw herself into the planning with meticulous precision, leveraging every connection she'd cultivated in California's luxury hospitality industry, from private vineyard tastings in St. Helena to an exclusive hot air balloon ride over the valley at sunrise. Every moment was curated to reflect elegance, sophistication, and seamless execution. Claire even managed to secure a Michelin-starred chef for the final dinner and reserved an entire villa retreat near Calistoga for the weekend finale. The logistics were flawless, because that's what Claire did. Excellence wasn't an aspiration for her, it was her baseline. Yet despite her dedication, cracks began to form beneath the polished surface. Vendors started calling her directly, confused about delayed deposits and conflicting emails from the Prescott office. When Claire checked her company account, she realized she had unknowingly fronted several major payments herself, using her firm's credit line to secure key bookings after Ethan had assured her their family office would handle the rest. When she brought it up, Ethan casually dismissed her concerns. "The wire transfers take time," he said. "The accountant's just being cautious with large international transactions." His answers were smooth, but Claire's instincts, long honed by years in business, told her otherwise. She noticed other strange shifts, too. Margot had grown even more controlling than usual, requesting last-minute changes without explanation. Allison, Ethan's sister, began referring to the event as "mother's gift to the family," conveniently leaving out Claire's role. The itinerary she'd created with care was being altered behind her back, and no one informed her of the changes. Claire chalked it up to rich people entitlement, until she overheard Allison whispering to a cousin about what's coming after Napa. Something about their tone unsettled her. Still, Claire pressed forward. She reminded herself she had a reputation to protect, a name that meant something in elite circles. Even if the Prescotts never acknowledged her worth, the industry did. And if nothing else, she would make Margot's celebration a triumph. For her own pride, if not for their approval. What Claire didn't know yet was that this perfect event was never meant to include her. It was designed to erase her. The morning of their flight to Napa, something shifted. Claire was double-checking the final vendor confirmations from her home office, while Ethan showered in the next room. His phone buzzed on the dresser. Normally, she wouldn't have touched it. Claire respected privacy the same way she commanded it in her professional life, but that day, something compelled her. Maybe it was the months of small humiliations, the unspoken distance growing between them, or the lingering feeling that the upcoming trip wasn't just a celebration, but a performance. The message on the screen lit up with cheerful cruelty. "Can't wait to see you in Napa, did you tell her yet? Ma'am." Her heart pounded. She tapped the message open with shaking fingers, bracing for what she already suspected. Madeline Shaw, Ethan's ex-girlfriend, the woman Margot never stopped praising, who seemed to drift back into their lives whenever things felt fragile. The message thread told a story Claire hadn't been invited to. Hotel plans, prenatal appointments, sweet nicknames, and worse, a due date 4 months away. They weren't just rekindling an old flame, they were starting a new life, one that didn't include Claire. She didn't scream. She didn't confront. Instead, she forwarded the messages to herself and quietly deleted the evidence from Ethan's phone. Her fingers moved with the calm of someone trained to stay in control under pressure. Later, while Ethan packed in the other room, she turned on his laptop, ostensibly to look at the flight itinerary, but what she found made her blood run cold. Bank statements, offshore transfers, a draft divorce settlement. The proposal was cruel in its precision, a minimal payout, no claims on family assets, and a carefully worded narrative of an amicable separation due to irreconcilable schedules. Claire's breath caught as she scrolled through the final detail, a script. Written by the Prescott family attorney, it outlined the exact language Ethan would use to announce their split, at Margot's birthday dinner no less. The public exclusion, the distant behavior, the erased seat at the table, it was all part of the plan. A clean exit for Ethan, a silent, shameful dismissal for Claire. But Ethan had underestimated her. So had all of them. She backed up every document, every message, every financial irregularity. Then she smiled softly in the mirror, adjusted her blazer, and zipped up her suitcase. She would go to Napa. She would smile and play her role, and when the time was right, she would flip the entire script. The Prescotts arrived in Napa with all the self-importance of visiting royalty. A fleet of luxury SUVs greeted them at the private terminal, organized down to the minute by Claire. She stood to the side, clipboard in hand, while Margot Prescott stepped onto the tarmac wearing oversized sunglasses and a wide-brimmed designer hat. "I thought we requested Bentleys," she remarked, inspecting the matte black Escalades with thinly veiled disdain. "Eastfield, corporate?" Claire smiled tightly. "Bentleys were booked out. These were custom routed from a San Francisco diplomat fleet. Same drivers the vice president used last quarter." Margot didn't respond. She was already asking her assistant to adjust her seating preferences at the estate. The welcome at the Vineyard Resort was just as seamless. Claire had arranged every detail, from the fresh lavender bouquets in the rooms to personalized wine selections waiting in each suite. But as the family moved through the lobby, there was no word of thanks, no acknowledgement of her months of planning. Ethan kissed her on the cheek absently, murmuring something about needing to check in with his father about some fund restructuring, then disappeared upstairs. The pattern continued and deepened over the next few days. At the first dinner, Claire found herself seated at the far end of the long farmhouse table, wedged between two distant cousins, while Margot, Ethan, and his siblings laughed over inside jokes from a European ski trip Claire had never been invited to. When she tried to join a discussion about the upcoming birthday gala schedule, Allison Prescott quickly redirected the conversation to shopping plans. "Actually, we thought the girls might sneak off for some boutique time in downtown St. Helena tomorrow. You'd probably prefer to finalize the dinner setup, right, Claire?" Her tone was sugary, but her eyes said, "Stay in your lane." Even the staff seemed confused. One concierge quietly asked Claire if she was part of the team, after watching her review the logistics schedule for the third time. And though she and Ethan shared a suite, she woke each morning to find him already gone. A sticky note on the counter: "Breakfast with Dad. See you at the tasting." The exclusion wasn't aggressive, it was surgical. The Prescotts weren't just ignoring her, they were staging her disappearance in real time. And while they believed she was silently unraveling, Claire was already building her revenge, one cancellation at a time. On the morning of Margot's birthday dinner, Claire was in the estate's private business lounge printing final confirmation documents when she heard the voice that froze her in place. Margot Prescott, distinct, clipped, and perfectly composed, was speaking to the event coordinator just beyond the partition wall. 12 seats, not 13. Yes, I'm aware of the original head count, but the revised chart is final. My son's wife won't be staying for dinner. It's a delicate family matter." Claire stood motionless, the papers still warm in her hands. The words sliced through her like glass. It hadn't been a mistake. The missing chair wasn't an oversight. It was a deliberate erasure. The grand finale in a production she had unknowingly been cast in as the woman who simply didn't fit. Her breath caught, but her hands didn't tremble. Instead, they moved with purpose, packing the documents neatly back into her bag. Her eyes were dry, her pulse steady. The rage that simmered beneath her skin crystallized into clarity. They hadn't just excluded her. They'd written her out of the script entirely. All the months of planning, the money fronted through her business, the sleepless nights spent perfecting every detail for a woman who had despised her from the start. It had all been used as a stage for humiliation. But if they wanted a performance, Claire would give them one, just not the one they expected. She returned to her suite, changed into her professionally pressed navy slacks, and opened her laptop. One by one she began canceling the pillars of Margot Prescott's birthday week. The wine tour, gone. The yacht brunch, reversed. The estate chef's multi-course tasting experience, voided by contract. Claire's company had been the account holder. She wasn't just walking away, she was taking the entire event with her, and by the time Margot lifted her champagne glass at dinner, basking in the illusion of control, Claire would be watching from the shadows, with the match already lit. From a quiet corner near the wine cellar entrance, Claire watched the Prescott celebration unfold with theatrical precision. The golden hour light bathed the vineyard estate in warmth as servers poured vintage champagne and a string quartet played softly under hanging lanterns. At the head of the long table, Margot Prescott beamed in her pearl-studded gown, surrounded by 12 guests, all smiles, all oblivious. Claire had designed this dinner to be unforgettable, and now it would be for entirely different reasons. At exactly 7:42 p.m., the estate's general manager, a man Claire had worked with multiple times before, stepped up to Charles Prescott and spoke in hushed, apologetic tones. Claire could see the confusion flicker across his face as he straightened, pulled out his wallet, then hesitated. The manager shook his head, holding up a tablet with billing records and an email from Claire's company revoking financial responsibility for the event. The funding account was closed. Claire had rescinded every payment she had authorized, backed by documentation proving her sole ownership of the vendor contracts. The ripple effect was immediate. The waiter stopped mid-pour with a bottle of Bordeaux. The chef stepped into view, his brow furrowed. Whispers spread across the table. Allison leaned toward her husband, clearly flustered. Ethan, seated beside Margot, stared at his phone, where a fresh message from Claire had just landed. "All deposits have been returned to my firm. Your family's secrets are no longer mine to protect. Enjoy the evening." He stood abruptly, knocking over his glass. "What the hell is going on?" he hissed, drawing eyes from nearby tables. Margot's face blanched, her fingers gripping the edge of her chair as she demanded to speak to someone in charge. The estate manager calmly explained that without an active payment method, the dinner service would be paused and full settlement required before continuing. And just like that, the Prescott illusion shattered. Claire sipped a glass of wine in the shadows, watching them scramble. The family that had plotted to humiliate her now sat paralyzed in a silence far louder than laughter. This was no meltdown, it was a surgical unmaking, the perfect event, perfectly dismantled. Claire didn't need to shout. Her revenge arrived like a whisper, calculated and complete. And they never saw it coming, because they never believed she was powerful enough to do it. Claire emerged from the shadows with the grace of a woman who had already won. The Prescotts were mid-crisis, servers frozen, dishes being cleared mid-course, and a flustered Margot waving down the estate manager like a queen betrayed. Conversations had halted. All 12 pairs of eyes turned toward Claire as she approached the table with measured, deliberate steps. The soft rustle of her gown was the only sound beneath the weight of the growing tension. Ethan's face drained of color, and he rose from his chair as if trying to intercept her. "Claire, we can talk," he began. She held up one hand. "No need, Ethan. Everything's already been said. I heard it loud and clear. When you chose 12 seats." Margot stood, shaking with a mix of rage and embarrassment. "How dare you sabotage my celebration?" she spat. Claire smiled, calm and cold. "You planned my erasure, Monroe. I simply decided to make it mutual." Gasps fluttered among the family. Charles Prescott opened his mouth to speak, but Claire cut him off with the same efficiency she used in boardrooms. "Every event, every reservation, every luxury this week was arranged under contracts I signed and paid for using my company's resources, so I canceled them. Consider it a professional courtesy." "You'll regret this," Allison snapped, standing beside her mother. "You'll walk away with nothing." Claire turned to Ethan. "She's wrong. I walk away with everything I built, and the proof of every asset you tried to hide. Offshore transfers, forged documents, and the draft divorce script you were going to read at this very table. She paused, then added quietly, "I've backed it all up." The silence turned oppressive. Ethan looked at her like a man watching his carefully built house crumble. "Claire, please, we can fix this," he said, desperation leaking through the cracks in his voice. But Claire had nothing left to fix. "You tried to stage my exit," she said. "Now I'm choosing it myself, on my terms." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She simply turned away, shoulders squared, and walked out of the vineyard with the same poise she'd entered. The difference now? She was free, and they were the ones left without a seat at the table. Claire returned to Chicago with the quiet satisfaction of a woman who had nothing to prove and nothing left to lose. She stepped into her sunlit apartment, smaller than the Prescott estate but entirely her own, and hired a moving service to collect her personal belongings from the house she once shared with Ethan. She took only what was indisputably hers: her clothes, the art she'd bought before their marriage, and the signed first editions she'd collected during years of red-eye flights and client deals. Everything else, the furniture Margot insisted on choosing, the monogrammed linens, the society-approved decor, she left behind like an old skin. Claire wasn't just walking away from a marriage, she was walking away from a world that had never truly seen her. The Prescott scandal rippled quietly but effectively through elite circles. Reports of financial mismanagement and SEC interest appeared in small but pointed columns. Charity boards graciously moved Margot to honorary roles. Clients quietly pulled their money from the family firm. Claire never spoke publicly, but her silence only made her seem more dignified. Her own business flourished. Former skeptics now admired her discretion, her strength, her refusal to play the victim. 1 year later, Claire returned to Napa, this time to plan a high-profile wedding for a tech entrepreneur at the very same vineyard estate. She stood on the same patio where she had once been excluded, now commanding a team of staff, florists, chefs, and coordinators who answered to her. As the sun dipped below the vines, she lifted a glass of champagne and toasted. Not to revenge, not to survival, but to clarity. The missing chair hadn't broken her, it had freed her. Because sometimes being excluded from the wrong table is the greatest gift of all. The story of Claire Monroe teaches a powerful lesson about self-worth, boundaries, and reclaiming power in the face of manipulation and exclusion. Claire entered a world that was never built to accept her, believing that love and hard work would earn her a seat at the table. Instead, she was systematically belittled, used, and quietly erased by a family obsessed with status and appearances. But rather than collapse under the weight of humiliation, Claire chose dignity over drama and turned their carefully orchestrated betrayal into a masterclass in quiet strength. The lesson is clear: never let anyone define your value, especially those who fear your independence. Claire's revenge wasn't loud or vindictive. It was controlled, professional, and rooted in truth. She didn't burn bridges, she simply removed herself from the ones that led nowhere. True power lies not in proving yourself to those who refuse to see you, but in knowing when to walk away and taking your worth with you. In the end, Claire didn't just escape a toxic family. She reclaimed her voice, her business, and her future. And that's a lesson worth toasting to. You don't need a seat at someone else's table when you can build your own.